Hello. In the last video I looked at the various purposes that were served by wall paintings in our medieval churches. In this session I'm going to begin with a look at the materials and the methods that were employed. Over 30 different pigments have been identified, and with so much painting going on, I think it's a fair assumption that there would be specialist dealers who were supplying these colours. The earth-based colours, the red and yellow ochres and white from chalky clays, would have been fairly readily available and relatively inexpensive, and that red, yellow and white combination is common. It's sometimes called a bacon and egg palette. And a wide range of shades can be achieved by mixing those three colours in differing quantities. Black was derived from charcoal or from burnt bone, greens from copper salts or lead, and a richer, more expensive green from malachite. Brighter reds were imported from the area around the Mediterranean and the Middle East, made either from powdered cinnabar or from natural crimson, a red dye produced by the female Kermes beetle. Blues are rare. The most stable pigment, ultramarine, is made from lapis lazuli, and the source of that was Afghanistan. Hugely expensive, it costs more than gold leaf. The mineral azurite, with sources near Lyon in France and in Eastern Europe, produced a cheaper blue, but it was still expensive and less stable than ultramarine. Most of the cheaper materials were mixed with lime water, and the more costly pigments were mixed with a binding agent, casein, egg white, or perhaps a plant-based oil such as linseed. And wall paintings are often lumped together under the single umbrella of frescoes, but true frescoes, in which the paint is applied to wet plaster, which fixes the colours, was rare in English churches. We saw some examples in part 3, painted by the so-called Lewis group in churches in Sussex. We also have examples at St Mary Magdalene's Church, Ickleton in Cambridgeshire. This is a 12th century Passion scene. And again 12th century, the raising of Jairus' daughter. This is in the Church of St Michael and All Angels, Copford Green, which is near Chelmsford in Essex. The most common technique is known as secco, which is painting onto dry plaster, and the walls will be prepared with a thin skin of lime or other sizing material, perhaps casein, and then the subject and scene sketched in before it was painted. There is something in between, known as mezzo frescoes, which involves painting before the plaster is fully dry, and we have examples of that at St Mary's Church, Kempley, in the Forest of Dean in Gloucestershire, and St Mary's Church is now in the care of English Heritage. The basic scheme is painted onto wet plaster, and then after it's fully dried the detail is added. And the chancel at Kempley has an almost complete set of wall paintings. They date to around about 1120, and they include the earliest known use of azurite in England. Here we have Christ in Majesty in a shape known as a mandorla. Gets its name from the Italian word for almond, in this case a triple mandorla, seated on a rainbow in an act of benediction. Many church wall paintings were intended to provide moral guidance, and there is a singularly imaginative depiction of morality at the Church of St Peter and St Paul, Chaldon in Surrey. It's a purgatorial ladder, or a ladder of souls, with the 7 deadly sins and their punishment. Dates to round about 1200. It had been covered in plaster, and then it was uncovered in the 19th century. Starting in the lower left-hand quadrant, we have sloth, gluttony, pride and anger receiving their comeuppance in hell. And on the ladder that divides the painting, the souls try, and in the lower half of the painting fail to climb upwards. In the lower right-hand quadrant we have the remaining deadly sins dealt with: lust, avarice and envy. And avarice is one of the most graphically depicted. Here we have a man with 3 money bags hanging from his belt, and there is another around his neck. He is sitting over a fire. His right hand is raised in protest, but it's all in vain. He's pinned in position by a pair of fiends with pronged forks, and is being made to count the coins that spew from his mouth. And the final detail in this quadrant is the source of all sin, the tree of knowledge from the Garden of Eden, with the tempting serpent coiled in the upper branches. The upper right-hand quadrant of the painting shows the more fortunate souls. They've avoided eternal damnation and they're scaling the purgatorial ladder to heaven, while angels encourage them on their upward journey. And Christ stands over the devil with a spear. And then finally, in the upper left quadrant, we have St. Michael with his balance for the weighing of the souls. It's a complex scheme of work with lots of imaginative details. Here we have a spiked beam suspended between 2 devils, and on it there is a potter trying to shape a pot but without a wheel, and a blacksmith trying to forge a horseshoe but he hasn't got his anvil. It's sending a clear message to the unrepentant medieval sinner: you will continue to labour in the hereafter, but it will all be futile. Now, so this painting uncovered beneath plaster in the 19th century. Being covered in plaster had helped to preserve it. Once exposed, these paintings are susceptible to fading, and the question of how they should be treated, restored, conserved has been subject to a lot of debate in the past, but today's conservators are very highly skilled. Now, next time I'm going to take a look at angel roofs. If you've enjoyed this video, hit the like and subscribe buttons and click on the notification bell to be informed when the next video is available, or you can subscribe by clicking on the rose window over my shoulder.